Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for December 13th, 2017. On today's show, we're going to be diving into a bunch of news, including Guillermo del Toro's a new film that he has in development called Nightmare Alley, our reaction to the Annihilation trailer. Rian Johnson tells us the story behind how Disney agreed to his new Star Wars trilogy without a story. American Werewolf remake details are finally in. George Lucas reviews Star Wars Last Jedi, and Nutcracker and the Four Realms goes into reshoots. And in our feature presentation, we'll be talking more about that Lady Bird Rotten Tomatoes controversy. This is Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film writers Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
And Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
So let's just get into this. It's been a busy morning. Some of us had to be online early to request our press tickets for Sundance, which is always kind of a cluster F of a situation, and we never get what we want, but we get what we need. Yes. So let's just jump into the news now. Guillermo del Toro has another project in development. HT, tell us about it, and will it ever get made?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it, Peter? So, fresh off of the 7 Golden Globe nominations that Shape of Water has recently received, Guillermo del Toro is looking forward to a couple new projects that he may or may not follow through on. He kind of has a history of not completing some of the projects that he announces, and we get excited for them, but then they kind of fall to the wayside. So his newest project is a remake of the 1947 noir Nightmare Alley, and he has been attached to this project to write and direct it, and he's currently planning to co-write the film with the Forbidden Room writer Kim Morgan. And this is like I said, a remake of the 1947 movie that starred Tyrone Power as a con man who teams up with a female psychiatrist to swindle victims at a seedy traveling circus. So it's not really along the lines of what we connect with Guillermo del Toro, who usually does horror and monster genres, but he's kind of dabbled with noir before, and the seedy circus setting seems to be up his alley. But before we get excited, I do want to remind you that he has promised us things before, and we've gotten excited about films like the stop-motion Pinocchio film, which already had concept art out before it did not get made, and it looked like a gorgeous, really interesting film, and it was in talks and development for, I think, a good 8 years before it just did not get made.
Or
Hellboy 3.
Yeah, Hellboy 3, or the adaptation of the Disneyland ride, Haunted Mansion. Mm-hmm. I have a poster on my wall signed by Guillermo del Toro for that movie that never happened from Comic-Con, I think, 10 years ago. And, you know, he just has dozens and dozens of projects that he's gotten involved with that have never had Mansions of Madness. Like, I feel like someday I would love to see a documentary of Guillermo talking about all these, you know, projects that never happened. But if you actually ever get a chance to talk to Guillermo, he, like, still is, I mean, he's a smart guy. He's a very smart guy, much smarter than I. But he still seems optimistic that he's going to get a chance to make many of these films.
He's just an excited film buff, which I admire, but at the same time, he only has so many, you know, hands in which he can put these in these pots. He also has The Fantastic Voyage, which he's developing alongside James Cameron, and another few films that he's producing, like Antlers, which is a new film that got announced as well. So it's too much. Guillermo, just step back, look at one movie, and get us excited for that, and then we can, you know, meet in the middle.
I think he's one of those guys that, like, he's like, you know, if I have 12 horses in this race, then chances are one of them is going to come in first. You know what I mean? Like, one of them, or no, that's probably the bad analogy. One of the horses will get out the gate. I guess is probably the proper analogy.
Process of elimination.
Yes. Also on the site today, we featured the first trailer for Annihilation, the Alex Garland, Natalie Portman, Oscar Isaac, sci-fi adaptation. Chris, I know you're a big fan of this book. We have all seen this trailer. What do you think of this trailer?
I gotta be honest, I don't like this trailer that much, but I think I understand why I don't like it because a few days ago there was a story about how behind the scenes producers were concerned that the film is too complex or too weird for, quote unquote normal audiences. So this to me, it looks like a case of a studio cutting a very generic by the numbers trailer to sort of lure in, a general audience. Because the book, I don't know, this looks like a horror thriller, and that's not really what the book is at all. And I understand that director Alex
this looks like Predator or Alien, like it looks like something like that.
Yeah, and like Alex Garland, the director, has said he's changed some stuff, but this looks like if this trailer is true to the film, he's changed almost like everything from the book, which concerns me slightly because the book was so good. I mean, I'm still going to see it because I loved Alex Garland's Ex Machina. I loved the cast of this movie, but this trailer, it's not what I was hoping for. I thought the first teaser trailer was much better.
At CinemaCon this year, they showed us like this 10-minute sizzle reel from the film. I think it was 10 minutes, maybe it was less. But it only got into the kind of alien stuff in the last minute or two. Like it seemed like that was like a late in the film kind of thing, but it seems to be a much bigger plot of this film. I haven't read the book, so maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong. Like, at what point in the story does she end up exploring this location?
Well, in the book literally begins with them already in. It's called Area X, and the book begins with them already there, and you learn from flashbacks how they got there, but it's pretty much like you're literally just dropped into the middle of the story in the book. There's not like a lot of setup, which is sort of adds to the story because it's a deliberately disorienting story, and that adds to it.
Interesting. HT, what did you think of this trailer?
I didn't like it as much as the original teaser trailer, which was very haunting and moody, and I kind of like those sort of tone poems that we get in trailers that don't really reveal a lot of the story. And yeah, like Chris said, it's a lot more horror actiony, but I won't put too much stock in the marketing at this point, just because I do think that it's kind of the executives panicking about how to market this film and whether audiences will be able to enjoy it. I feel like, I mean, I'm hoping because Alex Garland is so talented and Ex Machina is such a great film and is not a film that tries to take shortcuts or tries to appeal too hard to pander to the audience. So I think this is a film that will probably stay by the more cerebral parts of the book rather than amping up the action.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. Is obviously I don't think Alex Garland is a person who is making a broad sci-fi thriller, but at the same time you got to sell this to an audience. And I know you love that first teaser. I actually like the teaser as well. But we've already talked about this, but we've seen what happened with Blade Runner 2049. Mm-hmm. They kind of ran their whole marketing campaign on kind of those tonal poems and kind of like a marketing a mood and a tone rather than a story, and I feel like that did not pay off for them at the box office. But you have been writing about Mr. Robot on the site all this season. I haven't caught up on the season yet, so I'm a few episodes behind. I think the last one I saw was actually there's an episode of this season of Mr. Robot that is presented all in one shot, even though it's like spliced together digitally. It is amazing, and I highly, if you aren't watching Mr. Robot and have no plans to watch Mr. Robot, I almost recommend you see that episode because it's so great. But this season, HT, your coverage of Mr. Robot has been kind of, it seems kind of negative.
Is it negative? I do. Okay, so sometimes
it seems like you are being you're disappointed at times this season.
I mean, there are a couple episodes where I'm not quite enthused by the episodes, but I think that this season has been a large step up from the second season, and I really like that it's been just nonstop sort of action and like the momentum bringing forward this story arc versus sort of the confusing and frustrating misdirection of the second season. Here there's no misdirection except for in some of the like ways that the audience is set to perceive what's going on in the story. But, Mr. Robot is a hard show to sort of to watch as you're going. It's kind of something that you have to think on for a long time. And I agree. It's been that long take episode is one of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen, I think. And
by the way, that's something that couldn't have been done, I think, 4 years ago. Like, it just wouldn't have been possible to achieve something on that level of filmmaking on the small screen. Like, it definitely wouldn't have been able to do it with, when they were filming stuff with film. But now there's word that Mr. Robot season 4 has been ordered by USA. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? How long should the series keep on going?
I think it's a good thing. I have no idea where this season is going to end. It's been kind of building up to just this very strange climax that we can't really predict what's going to happen. Each season has had sort of like a late season twist. In the first season, it was the revelation of the split personalities. In the second season, it was of the jail. And here we don't really know exactly how Sam Esmail is going to switch it up, or if he even is, because this season has been much more about like this movement of plot and these sort of careful interactions with the characters. Although they've been making hints, Sam Esmail has been making hints about like possible alternate universes and parallel universes and everything. So I get the feeling that maybe Mr. Robot might switch things up even more for the fourth season and just go on a completely different level of storytelling. So I contrary to some of my reviews, I will say that I've been really enjoying season 3 of Mr. Robot, just because, it's such a bleak show to watch that you can get caught up in your like own headspace. But as you sit with the series and sit with each episode, it really gets to you how phenomenal the show is and how it just kind of pushes the boundaries of what you can do with television. Sam Esmail particularly has a really very cinematic eye, and I always am really stunned by like what he can pull off, even though some of them can come off as kind of gimmicky. I really like that he's not afraid to do strange things with each episode. So I'm looking forward to season 4, which has just been renewed right before the season finale of season 3 airs tonight. So I have no idea where it will go or what to predict for it. I'm guessing maybe something to do with parallel universes, but that might just be a total red herring.
That would be interesting. Sam Esmail is a genius. I think he's bold. He isn't always successful with, the risks he takes, but I appreciate all the risks that he takes. And I can't wait to see him, go back to feature films and see what he can do on the big screen, as much as I'm loving what he's doing on the small screen. But speaking of a director who has done small screen stuff and big screen stuff, last week, before I saw Star Wars Last Jedi, I talked to Last Jedi director Rian Johnson about a bunch of things, but one of them was his new Star Wars trilogy. As you know, Disney has kind of greenlit a new Star Wars trilogy from Rian Johnson that will not be connected to the Skywalker saga, will not be connected to any of the characters we know and love. It's going to be set in a corner of the universe that we don't know of. And, obviously Rian Johnson is keeping pretty mum about what this new trilogy is going to be. But at the junket, I thought I had a way in, and I kind of asked him, how did this trilogy come about? So I'm going to play that clip right now. You're doing this film, but you're not doing the next one.
Yeah.
What was the decision beyond?
It was. Oh, but sorry, not.
Yeah.
It was never even really a decision. It's always just the way it was. It was always just the plan is for me to do this and then hand it off to the next filmmaker, whoever that was going to be. So. Yeah.
I know you can't talk about this trilogy. I'm not going to try to.
There's not much to talk about, honestly. I'm just at the beginning of the beginning.
Well, the one question I had, and I think you can probably say this without saying anything.
Yeah.
Is how did that come about?
Did
you have an idea and then you pitched it to Kat? Like, how did?
No, it came about because we were getting to the end of making this, and again, I knew I wasn't doing the next one, and I had a really good time not just making this movie, but working with Kathy and also working with Disney, working with Bob Iger, Alan Horn, Alan Bergman. We just had just a really good experience, and we were all it was like last week of senior year. We were cleaning out our lockers and all getting kind of sad and saying, how do we keep working together? And that I threw out, I said, the most interesting thing to me would be a new trilogy, one story told over 3 movies, go new places, meet new folks, come up with a new story to tell in the Star Wars universe. The sky's the limit. That sounds thrilling. And they really responded to that. So we're off, yeah.
And there was no specific idea. You just
that was it. That was the pitch.
I'm so excited as a fan of Star Wars and a fan of yours to get that.
Yeah.
But I'm also nervous. So does this mean I'm never going to get a Rian Johnson original movie, or for the next
That's sweet of you to say, man.
So I'm wondering, does this allow you to still do those movies?
Yeah, that's what I'm working on. That's what I'm planning right now. Is that because I do have a couple ideas that I've really well developed ideas, movies in my head that I had before this came around that I need to find time to do, and whether that means squeezing one in before the next trilogy starts or what have you. But I guess I also I think it's going to be really important to do that. I also, though, I don't know, it's strange. And I know you I know you didn't mean it this way, but it's in my head that there's no separation between the idea of doing that and the idea of my film, even this, this.
Oh,
I know you did, and I'm just talking out loud about my, because I would just.
It's just I want more loopers, I want more.
I know it. No, I totally understand, and I've got. The thing is, I also have those in my head. I've got a couple of really things I'm really excited about that are totally outside of couldn't be more different than Star Wars. Yeah. And I need to, it's going to be a matter of figuring out how we do the next trilogy so that I can keep doing those. Because, as much as I am excited about Star Wars and everything, and as deeply satisfying as it is to me, I think it'd be great to be able to do a few things outside of that too over the next 10 years.
Are you doing all 3 of those?
We'll see. I don't know yet. I know I'm going to come up with the whole thing. I know I'm going to write and direct the first one, and then I don't know yet. We'll see how it goes.
So that's really interesting that Disney did not hear a formal pitch of a story that he wanted. They're greenlighting 3 films based on just, the filmmaker, working with that filmmaker and him being excited for, to create a new story in this galaxy. HT or Chris, either one of you, is that nuts? Is it nuts that Disney would commit themselves to 3 films, not having any idea what those films are going to be?
It's definitely unprecedented for Disney, which likes to really plan things out and almost to a micromanaging level. But I'm really happy that they trust Rian Johnson that much. I think he's a really talented filmmaker, and it makes me only more excited for The Last Jedi, which, like you two, I've not seen. But I do think it's amazing. Maybe they're just ready for a leap of faith after working so meticulously on the past couple Star Wars films.
Yeah, and I kind of get the impression, reading between the lines, he obviously doesn't say anything about this. I asked him, why didn't he direct Episode 9? And he kind of said that wasn't in the cards for him. But I kind of get the impression, because I did do that follow-up of, what's going to happen to the future of non-Star Wars Rian Johnson original movies, because I'm, a huge Rian Johnson fan. And I get the impression that he didn't want to go right into another Star Wars movie, that they probably asked him to do Star Wars Episode 9, and he was like, no, I have this original project I want to do, but I would like to do more Star Wars. And I get the impression, this could be me making an assumption and making things up, but I get the impression of that's how this whole thing came about, which is interesting to me, that, Disney would take that big of a risk. I mean, you look at Fox taking a risk with the Avatar sequels, and you have a known quantity that made billions of dollars, and that even seems crazy to commit to 4 sequels or something. So I don't know. But moving on, one person that also saw Star Wars Last Jedi is a man by the name of George Lucas. HT, what did George Lucas think of Star Wars Last Jedi?
So he was actually quite brief in his review of The Last Jedi, which he recently saw and spoke to Rian Johnson about. But he said that it was beautifully made and that he spoke with Rian Johnson after viewing and was very complimentary. So it's sort of a 360 from what we've usually seen of George Lucas in terms of how he's spoken about Star Wars after Disney had acquired Lucasfilm, in which he had kind of a tumultuous relationship with them because he was sort of kicked out of the creative process and didn't really have much to say in this franchise that he helped create. So it's good that he has such high hopes, or like has such a good impression of Last Jedi, which means it's a great film, and it has a ringing endorsement from the franchise's creator.
For sure. But we'll never know what he really thinks. Do you know what I mean? Like, we never heard what he really thought of The Force Awakens.
Yeah. And this was through a spokesperson, too, that he spoke about his ringing endorsement. So
yeah, an endorsement through a spokesperson. A remake that has been in the works for a little while now is a remake of American Werewolf. Screenwriter, director Max Landis, son of John Landis, the original director, is now talking about that remake and how it differs from the original. Chris, what do we know?
Right, so Max Landis, he said he finally finished the first draft of the script, and he didn't go into too many details, but in the original film, it begins with two backpackers from America hiking across, the UK, across the moors, basically, and they happen upon this town, this little village where there's a werewolf running loose. And someone asked Max Landis online, what about that town with the villagers? Why didn't they take care of the werewolf themselves? And Max Landis said, answering this question and the nature of the village's role in the plot in the second and third act as of now are the biggest changes I've made to the original structure. So that's sort of a hint of how his film is going to differ from the original. He also said he rewatched the original and he thought it was quote unquote crazy how little happens in the movie, which is a comment that gives me a lot of concern, because if you watch that original movie and your only takeaway is, boy, not a lot is happening, I don't know if you understand how movies work. I don't know. I know
a comment like that, I feel like, can be taken out of context. I'm playing devil's advocate here because I think, as much as people like to hate on Max Landis, I think he's a smart person. Maybe it's kind of like that comment that, like, if you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is one of the best movies ever made, and you took Indiana Jones out of that equation, the movie would have still happened. The story would have still happened the way it happened. Do you know what I mean? The bad guys would have defeated themselves in the same way. Maybe it's kind of a comment like that.
It could be. I mean, look, I don't want to start up a whole bashing Max Landis thing. I do think every once in a while he does churn out an okay script, but I also feel like, I don't know. I remain a little confused as to how he keeps getting work, because he's had more flops than hits. But
nepotism.
Yeah, that could be that.
I don't think it's nepotism. Like, okay, there's a clip. He was appearing on the Nerdist podcast, and he pitched this idea for like a Peter Pan prequel kind of thing. I'll put the link in the show notes. But like, watching this guy pitch like the story, you can see how he probably would be in that room. And I've also read a couple of his scripts, which were much, much, much better than actual films that were made out of them, like that Frankenstein one. I'm not saying that Hollywood is doing him wrong. Like that feels like it's, I don't know. It feels.
He's just been victim to the same Hollywood machinations that many a screenwriter does.
But I will say this though. He reading his scripts and seeing how he kind of captures like very intricate emotions and people and the subtleties of someone. It's so weird that he doesn't seem to, as a person, be able to see himself and how he acts and how those actions and things he says might reflect on other people. Do you know what I mean? Like, he seems like this to be a master at writing people on the page. Maybe not on the screen so far, but on the page. And it just seems like, I think he would even admit, he comes off like a douche a lot. He really does.
Yeah. I give him a hard time sometimes, but I do think, he is a creative person, and creatives aren't always the best people, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I know his father, John Landis, was also kind of like manic, and people were kind of he had the same kind of reputation within Hollywood of people working with him. Anyways, let's move on to our last story for today, and that is Nutcracker in the Four Realms is going into reshoots. HD, what do we know?
So the Nutcracker in the Four Realms is directed by Lasse Hallström, who directed Chocolat and What's Eating Gilbert Grape. But unfortunately, due to scheduling issues, he wasn't available for the reshoots, which will be taking place over 32 days. So Disney has recruited Joe Johnston, who directed Captain America, The First Avenger, and The Rocketeer, to oversee the reshoots. So this is a little unusual and kind of reeks of the troubled production of Justice League, for example, where Joss Whedon took over after Zack Snyder had to leave due to family tragedy. But The Hollywood Reporter says that this is not due to Hallström being sidelined in any ways. This is just solely due to a scheduling conflict. And it is a little strange because usually reshoots are sort of penciled into calendars for big budget movies like this, but maybe the Nutcracker in the Four Realms required more reshoots than Hallström and the crew anticipated. So,
for sure. I mean, usually productions pencil in a week or two of reshoots. You said 32 days. That ends up being 6.5 weeks of reshoots. So that's pretty expensive. I remember seeing footage of this at CinemaCon or D23. One of it looks kind of like a mess. I don't know. I don't have any faith for this movie. What about you?
I already don't like the fact that they added the little subtitle and the Four Realms, because it sounds very YA fantasy-esque, which it seems is what they're trying to do, make it into sort of a Chronicles of Narnia meets Alice in Wonderland hybrid, which doesn't sound great to me because Alice in Wonderland was already quite a mess in terms of the Disney live-action adaptation. And I like Narnia, but on its own. So I don't really know. I think that CGI-heavy fantasy films like this tend to become very overwhelmed and overwhelming. So I don't have a lot of hope for it. I think the Nutcracker itself is a great, simple story, and I kind of like how sort of labyrinth-esque it is, because the Mouse King is quite devious and quite menacing, sort of how like Jareth the Goblin King is. It's just that kind of similar story. But they seem to be taking away that aspect and doing this whole sort of realm-jumping storyline, which seems a little confused. So yeah, I don't really have a lot of hope for it.
I like director Joe Johnston. He obviously, has a storied past with Lucasfilm and Star Wars, and Rocketeer, and probably his last best film was probably Captain America: The First Avenger. He's kind of thought of as a journeyman, kind of like Ron Howard nowadays, and that's probably explains why he would be brought in to kind of fix this movie. And he's retiring soon. It's a shame that he won't ever be able to make a Star Wars movie, but they'll hire him for 32 days of reshoots for this probably horrible movie. But let's move on to our feature presentation. Yesterday we mentioned on the podcast the story of Lady Bird's Rotten Tomatoes score. It was the best reviewed movie of all time. Had the most reviews with 100% positive rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And then yesterday, one critic gave it a negative or a rotten score on the platform that caused a lot of people to be mad. This critic, is notorious for kind of I don't want to say trolling, but he gave Wonder Woman a kind of rotten review. He kind of contrarian, yeah, contrarian's a good word. Chris, you have an update on the situation.
Right. So the other day, I was urging caution in that I don't think it behooves the film community to gang up on a film critic. But today, the critic, his name is Cole Smithy, he issued not really a rebuttal, but an explanation of why he rated the film rotten, even though he technically gave it.
By the way, do we really think his real name is Cole Smithy?
I don't know.
Because I'm not sure if people know this, but like when a filmmaker directs a film and they don't like the film, they can decide, I think it's a DJA clause, they can decide to take their name off the film and it will be released under the pseudonym Alan Smithy.
I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of films out there released by, you can look up Alan Smithy. I think there's actually a film about Alan Smithy.
I knew that, but I didn't make that connection, and now my mind is blown because maybe this guy is he's literally trolling the entire film community. But if he's not, this was his answer. He said, "Context is everything. I had to consider whether to cast Lady Bird as fresh or rotten in the context of a perfect score that people were using to trumpet Lady Bird as an all-time best-reviewed movie on RT." So basically what he's saying there is he saw everyone loved Lady Bird so much, and he thought, I don't think this movie is that great, so I'm going to deliberately bring the score down. So he's literally confessing there that he did this out of spite, which is a really jerk move to do. At the same time, though, in this sort of editorial I wrote on slashfilm.com, I do say I think everyone's getting just a little bit too upset over this, and just because this one guy doesn't want to give this film a good review, quote unquote, it doesn't make the film any less good. Like, if you love Lady Bird, don't let this guy ruin that for you. Just enjoy the film. And he's clearly wrong here. That's a film's critic job.
I don't think the fact that it's now 99%, people are like, oh, we're not going to see Lady Bird. I think it's the fact that people hate trolls and they look at this guy as a troll. And
I get that. I get it. And I hate trolls too, but I wish everyone would calm down. And I also feel like this is the reaction Cole Smithy, if that is his real name, wanted, and everyone's like feeding him what he wants. I mean, all trolls, that's what they want online. They want people to get mad. They want people to get quote unquote butthurt, as the kids say. And that's what everyone's doing. And this guy is probably just like kicking back and laughing his ass off at everyone. And I feel like everyone should just stop giving him the attention. Like, I've never heard of this guy until now, and now everyone knows his name.
Well, here's a question. And by the way, he has like less followers on Twitter than people I know that don't even use Twitter. So, he's not like a big guy. Like, people are actually coming around and being like, oh, wait, Rotten Tomatoes is decided by people like this, which I think people don't think about things like that. I think even like with something as big as the Golden Globes, we celebrate the Golden Globes every year, but I think people don't realize that the Golden Globes, is an award show voted on by, what is it, like a few dozen international critics. It's like, and it's nobody. Yes. What?
Yeah, it's the Hollywood Foreign Press. Press.
Yeah, and but like if you look up the names of these people that are in the Hollywood Foreign Press, I challenge you to recall one review that you read from any of these people. But that's not here nor there. I wanted to ask you guys, should a review rating be based on solely just the film, or could it include the conversation around the film, the cultural conversation, how people are responding to it? Do you know what I mean? Like, or should that rating just reflect your opinion of that content itself?
I really don't think a review should reflect what other people are saying about a film. I mean, I guess there's an argument to be made about the cultural conversation as a whole, but I feel like if you look at other people's grades before you issue your grade, you're approaching film criticism incorrectly. That's not how you should do it. Like, it should be your rating. It shouldn't be, oh, I wonder what everyone else rated this film before I decide my rating. That's not the way to do it.
I agree with Chris to an extent. I think film criticism is inherently subjective. It's what every person thinks or how they connect to a film. that being said, I think Rotten Tomatoes has sort of transformed the field, the criticism field, in a way that hasn't really been before. Like, there have been conversations about how much Rotten Tomatoes really influences the box office, for example, or people's perceptions. But you can't really argue with the fact that Rotten Tomatoes is gaining influence in some capacity. So, I mean, for example, we see on marketing like trailers and everything like that, that they use the Rotten Tomatoes score as a way of advertising these films. So it's interesting to me because, like, I personally agree that film criticism is subjective. You should come away with your own opinions of film, but at the same time, the way that these films build anticipation and build audiences is through this larger cultural conversation, and Rotten Tomatoes is part of that.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I think part of what you're saying is there are expectations to be had, be it from the marketing of a film, even coming out of Last Jedi, I'm betting you if you look at reviews for The Last Jedi, half of them are commenting on what they expected from the marketing and what they got. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're commenting on bigger than just the content itself. And I know there's been times, even with me, that I've, a film was like a darling of a film festival that I was not at. And later when I got to see it, my opinion on that film was not just on that film, but on kind of the hype and the expectations of, do you know what I mean? Chris, does that ever happen to you?
I see what you're coming from there, where, there has been films like that where I hear great things about it, and then I see it and I think, well, that wasn't that good. But if I were reviewing the film, I don't think I would let that influence my rating. I mean, I would hope not, but I guess anything's possible.
Yeah. I think the problem here is this guy, gave the same score to a bunch of movies over the years. And each one of those films that he gave the score, this rating, he gave a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. But this one was the one with the score, the single review with the score that got a Rotten rating, which seems to indicate that it's trolling to me. I mean, if it isn't obvious enough from his tweet. But yeah, so I think we said enough, right? Like, did you, Chris? Actually, you wrote a whole article on the site about this. And people can go read it on slashfilm.com. We'll link it in the show notes. But is there anything else from your article that you'd like to say here?
No, I mean, like you said, the article is online. I advise everyone to read it. And like I said earlier, just stop feeding this guy. He wants this reaction, and I guarantee he's going to try this again now because he saw this reaction. So he's just going to wait for the next really well-reviewed film, and he's going to pull the same stunt, and just ignore him when that happens.
Okay. Before we go, I have one question for both of you. Like, how do you solve this problem of, like, a troll within the system? Because, like, do you remove them from the system because obviously they're trolling? Or, like, there's people like Armin White, critics that, like, seem to be contrarians, but there's a lot of value to their review, even though it's, not the opinion of most of the people out there. You can't remove voices like that from the system. So how do you fix this system? Do you make it so that, if I give a movie a B+, that is automatically fresh? If I give a movie, 7 out of 10, that's automatically fresh. But if I give it 6 out of 10, it's like, do you guys have any suggestions on how? I mean, it seems to me that with Rotten Tomatoes gaining such significance in the popular culture, that there needs to be more kind of oversight to this. Like, how can they fix it?
Like a government body. I mean, I agree with you to an extent. I wonder if there should be, like, in terms of Rotten Tomatoes or other critic aggregator sites like Metacritic, whether there's like a stricter standard that should be held, or whether, like, each of the reviews should be combed over by a team that can decide whether it's truly rotten or fresh. But the this is the aggregation of reviews. And I think the only way to really like beat the system are to read separate individual reviews of critics that you admire on your own. So that's like a lame answer to that. But I think in order to just kind of get out of that bubble of tomato meters and aggregation and systems, you need to just read a review, because that's what it's all kind of boils down to.
And I know a lot of people out there are saying make it harder to get approved by Rotten Tomatoes to be a tomato meter critic. I can tell you, I've tried to become a tomato meter critic. I've, some years in my past, I saw, hundreds of movies at film festivals in those years and did reviews and couldn't get on the tomato meter because I wasn't in a film critic group, which I now am. But it's not easy to become a Rotten Tomatoes approved critic. So Chris, I'll leave you with the same question. What can be done to make this process better?
I really don't know. I do think maybe having the system rate things as fresh or rotten by the grade makes sense, but then what's going to stop people from just like deliberately giving it a bad grade then?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think what HT said is correct, where you shouldn't really depend on the tomato meter score. You should just read reviews. I mean, like Rotten Tomatoes is not the be all end all of a film.
You're asking people to do work that requires reading skills. That requires time.
Listen, we're hoping for a better world, Peter.
Yeah.
Hey, it makes it so much easier for me to go to a webpage and see a number. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't even see the number. I could just see Fred. I could just see I don't even have to look at the number, guys. I can look at the tomato or that green splat, and I know.
Or you can read the review roundups published by slashfilm.com.
Yeah, which admittedly presents a lot more information, I think, than Rotten Tomatoes does. But anyways, I think this has come to an end. HT, where can we find more of your work online?
You can find me at slashfilm.com. I'm on Twitter at htranbui, and I have a podcast, the Millennial Falcon Podcast, on iTunes.
Chris, where can we find more of your work?
I'm also at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at Evangelista413.
You can find me at slashfilm.com. You can find me on Twitter at slashfilm. You can find all the articles talked about today on slashfilm.com and linked in the show notes. Slashfilm Daily is published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, all the popular podcast apps. Please go to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review. If you have a question, comment, concern, send it to us at peter@slashfilm.com. That's peter@slashfilm.com. If you have a question that you want us to read on the air, please leave your name and general geographic location so we can mention it on the air. We will see you tomorrow.